So let's talk about managing AI risk. We're going to dig into a new framework called PAICE. That's P-A-I-C-E, pronounced PACE. It stands for Performance, Accountability, Integrity, Collaboration, and Evolution. And it's built on a really powerful, kind of radical idea that when it comes to AI safety, well, we've been looking in all the wrong places. See, instead of just focusing on policies nobody reads, PACE is all about measuring what people actually do when they get their hands on AI.
To really get why this matters, let me paint you a picture. Imagine a team uses a fancy AI to create a huge sales forecast. It looks amazing, it's polished, it's full of data, and management loves it. The only problem? It's completely, utterly wrong, and that one subtle mistake ends up costing the company millions of dollars.
And here's the real head-scratcher. Everyone did what they were supposed to do. The AI policy? Yep, it was signed. The mandatory training modules? All completed. So what went wrong? Where did the process completely fall apart? This is the exact question that is forcing a major rethink in how we govern AI.
And that leads us right into this really important idea, something called the governance theater trap. It's what happens when all our safety activities just create the illusion of security, without actually making anything safer. You see, this whole theater thing happens because most of our safety measures are just about checking a box. They measure our intent, like signing a policy that says you promise to be careful. But they completely miss what our actual behavior is on a chaotic Tuesday afternoon when a deadline is breathing down our necks. So, on the one hand, you've got all the stuff that looks good on paper. Signed policies, training logs, those compliance dashboards that always glow a nice, happy green. But on the other hand, you have what actually stops a disaster. The real-world stuff, like the habit of actually checking the AI's work, knowing when to call for help, and exercising critical judgment.
And that gap, the one between the paperwork and the practice, that's exactly where the biggest AI risks are hiding. And you know what? They're usually hiding in plain sight.
It is so easy to blame the algorithm when things go sideways. It's the computer did it. But the real point of failure, the place where things truly break, it's almost never some evil rogue AI. It's in that simple, everyday moment of handoff. That quiet second where a person just accepts what the AI gave them and moves on. This moment, this handoff, it happens in what's called the collaboration layer. Think of it as this invisible space where our very human biases, like our natural tendency to just trust a confident-sounding machine, clash with the real-world friction of actually stopping to double-check the work. And that's where tiny, unnoticed errors just quietly pile up until they become a catastrophe. Okay, so this brings us to the million-dollar question, right? If our old-school governance tools, the policies, the training videos, if they're failing us, how on earth are we supposed to see what's happening in this critical, invisible moment of human-AI interaction?
All right, so how do we fix this? Well, the solution requires a pretty radical shift in how we think about the problem. We have to stop measuring what we hope people are doing, and we need to start observing what they actually do.
It's as simple and as difficult as that. The only way to really know if an organization is ready for AI is to move from just assuming they're safe to having actual evidence. We need a way to see safe behavior in action. But how do you test for safety? It sounds a little weird, but the answer is you have to introduce failure. The PACE framework does this with a method it calls strategic failure injection. Seriously, just think of it like a fire drill, but for AI. In a safe, controlled test, a person is given an AI-generated answer that is secretly, subtly wrong. And we just watch. Do they have the skills and the skepticism to catch it?
And this method measures their skills across the 5 dimensions of PACE. That's performance, accountability, integrity, collaboration, and evolution. Now, you'll probably notice one of these is highlighted, accountability. And that is no accident. It's weighted more heavily because in this new world, owning the outcome is way more important than just getting a fast answer.
Of course, the second you start talking about measuring behavior at work, a huge red flag goes up, as it should. It can sound an awful lot like surveillance, and that's a concern we absolutely have to tackle head-on. And it's a totally fair question. Is this just Big Brother watching over your shoulder? The answer has to be a hard no. And the reason it's not surveillance comes down to how the system is designed from the ground up.
This is where privacy by design is completely non-negotiable. The system is built to avoid collecting any personal information. No names, no emails. It doesn't store your conversations. It doesn't use tracking cookies. The goal is not to monitor individuals. The goal is to understand the safety of the entire system by looking at anonymous, high-level patterns across teams or whole departments.
And look, this isn't just talk. They really practice what they preach. The PAICE platform itself, for instance, was built to be incredibly accessible, hitting a 99% compliance score with official web accessibility standards. It shows that this idea of building responsible, defensible systems is baked into its DNA.
So what's the upshot of all this? What do you actually get from this new approach? Well, it delivers the one thing that leaders, auditors, and regulators are all starting to ask for.
By measuring behavior safely and at a large scale, governance gets completely transformed. It stops being a checkbox exercise or a dusty policy binder sitting on a shelf. It becomes a living, breathing system that gives you measurable, defensible evidence of what your organization is truly capable of. And what does that evidence look like? Well, we're talking about real, concrete artifacts you can use. You can show auditors a clear baseline of your team's skills. You can pinpoint specific risks, like seeing a pattern of people over-trusting the AI. And most importantly, you can prove that you're getting better over time. It's tangible proof that you're doing your due diligence.
Which all leads to what might just be the single most important question for any leader dealing with AI today. It's not about which tools you bought or what your policy document says. It's this: do you have actual, defensible proof of what your people are capable of doing with these incredibly powerful tools?
So once you accept this one simple idea that safe AI collaboration isn't just a vague hope, but a real, measurable skill, everything changes. It becomes a core capability you have to manage, just like sales or finance. And that forces a much bigger, much more strategic question for all of us. How do you need to re-architect your organization, your workflows, your training, your leadership, to manage this new, absolutely critical asset? And that is the conversation that is changing everything.